Okay, cool. Alrighty, so welcome everyone to the Celo Governance Call. So in this call, we're gonna go over a few things, a few proposals for governance, and we're gonna go over them for the agenda. But first of all, I'd like to go over a few things that's gonna happen starting next week. So we already covered the core contracts in a previous call. And that was, we reached rough consensus on going forward with the core contracts. So the schedule for mainnet, we're gonna make the proposal on November 10. And on November 11, we're gonna approve the proposal for mainnet. And then from November 11 to the 16th, we're gonna have a voting period. And on by the November 16, we're gonna we gonna execute on the proposal. So I'm gonna be sending those dates out by Monday again as a reminder, so for everyone to participate in the governance around the core contracts. And we also have an existing announcement on Discord, but I'm gonna send again like on the mailing list on Monday as a reminder. The other thing I wanted to go over is the CIP process. So right now, yesterday was the last day for the review period for the CIP. And um, since the feedback we received from Victor, from Bison Field, and from others seems to be like overall positive, um, and no, there was no objection to the proposal. I moved it yesterday. I believe it's in pull request, but it's been, actually, no, I think yeah, it's active now. So the CIP process at the last all core dev call is active. Great. Just wanted to announce that. Any questions so far? Anyone wanted to point out anything or anything? Okay. I'm gonna assume silence means no questions, and we're gonna move on with the agenda. All right, so the agenda item, we have two proposals. The first one, CGP 14, CUSD rewards, is a proposal that Asa is gonna go over. And then we have CGP 15, adding Zcash to the seller treasury is a proposal that David is gonna go over. So yeah, let's go over CPP 14. Asa, you want to kick it off?
Of course. Yeah, and if Deepak, if you could, beautiful. Um, cool. Yeah. So this is something that's not quite at the stage of a governance proposal that's ready to be submitted on chain, but it's, I guess, more of an idea for a series of governance proposals going forward that I wanted to vet and I guess build consensus around and get feedback from everybody here, as well as those that may not be here. Basically, the idea is to reward, in a nutshell, the idea is to reward kind of early adopters of Celo dollars and users of kind of Celo as a payments platform with the Celo token. To reiterate, right, Celo's mission is to build a financial system that creates the conditions for prosperity for everyone. And I think what we've seen play out across other networks, but really not just other cryptocurrency networks, but also kind of other open source projects, is that the mission of the project is best able to succeed when you have a large and vibrant community of people contributing to and championing that mission. And I think the mission is really what attracted a lot of the kind of people who are probably here right now, right? The kind of early users. And one of the really beautiful things about cryptocurrencies, but also about Celo is, I would say particularly about Celo, given its kind of token economic model, is that the value of the protocol is really able to accrue to the participants. And one of the best ways, I think, to create this this kind of community contributing to and championing this mission is to, I guess, further enable the value of the protocol to kind of accrue to those champions. And so basically what we're proposing is to use the Merkle distributor contract that was used to do the uni airdrop to, over a period of time, distribute Celo to CUSD users. This is kind of I guess, a hypothesis, right? That distributing Celo to early adopters will kind of have the effect of kind of strengthening the community. And as the idea is that kind of as these distributions continue and as kind of we learn, we would, all of us could kind of modify the criteria that are used to kind of make these distributions, right? So the initial one that we're proposing, kind of before we've started to get that, close that feedback loop, is to do a very broad distribution of Celo to CUSD holders, CUSD holders that have completed at least 3 attestations, many of whom are likely to be Valora users, because that's kind of the, I would say probably the main place where attestations are completed right now. The attestations piece gives this a bit of Sybil resistance, right? Otherwise you could just, I guess, given that we're also proposing that these rewards be capped on a per address basis, such that no more than 500 Celo dollars count towards the accrual of these Celo rewards. The use of attestations as well, and requiring attestations, provides a bit of lightweight Sybil resistance against people just kind of divvying up their Celo dollars. The idea would be to do this kind of bi-weekly going forward, each of which would require a governance proposal. So every distribution would need to be approved by governance. And to kind of change the criteria as we learn more. So for example, you could imagine that, for example, once the Valora wallet launches and we start to learn a bit more about what behaviors correlate with kind of strong engagement with Celo as a payments platform, it may make sense to try to reward those specific behaviors, right? So you could imagine, for example, a future distribution, not just rewards distribution, not just requiring the user to have Celo dollars and to have completed these attestations, but to also have, say, invited a friend and have that friend, or invited another address and through the escrow contract, and had that escrow payment redeemed by somebody who has completed attestations for a new phone number. You could also imagine kind of sending and receiving transactions as kind of being criteria as well. So the reason this isn't ready for like an on-chain governance proposal is because the technology actually needs to be built. Yeah. Is that a question or just some noise? Anywho, yeah, it'll if we were to move forward with this and we were able to kind of build consensus here, it would probably take a couple weeks to actually build the I guess script that would kind of iterate over all the activity and kind of determine which addresses are eligible for Celo rewards. And so I would expect roughly, again, if we're able to find alignment on this idea, the first actual on-chain governance proposal to go out maybe in early December. So there's some more details in the forum post around kind of the specifics that we're proposing for the first such reward. But I would love to kind of get any and all feedback, answer questions, and try to build consensus around this in this call.
Hello, this is Victor from Bison Trails. I have a question. I guess so have you done like research or analysis or like reviewed how other I guess like how other folks have gotten users in this type of fashion before? I think the famous example that I'm thinking about is just like PayPal offering people, $10 a pop for coming online. Would love to like one, see what lessons you learned from it, or if you've done that analysis, and also two, I think that like, with crypto and like different kind of like attack mechanisms, such as like Celo being the most commonly thought of. Would love to hear any kind of like initial thoughts on what you think the attack vectors are and how you're defending against them.
Cool. Yeah, those are both fantastic questions. With regards to the first question as to, I think you're kind of thinking of this as a from a product growth angle, right? So the PayPal example, right? Give people $10 to kind of join PayPal and make a transaction, right? That's absolutely something that this technology, kind of the framework that we're proposing here could be used for. And I think two reasons, right, why the first distribution proposal that I'm making is not focused on that product growth angle. Yeah, it's twofold. First, I think there's a lot of value in community growth and kind of strengthening community alignment, right? And so the first distribution, because it's not exactly incentivizing specific behavior targeted to growth, it's just kind of it's much more broad. The kind of intention of the first distribution is just to try to it's kind of like a try and see, right? Like we've seen success in other networks with these sorts of things where early adopters and early users become much more engaged just by having a bit more of a stake in the governance and the growth of the platform. The second reason that this is not as targeted in, again, the first distribution at product growth is because it's still specifically Valora, which I think right now is kind of the main, is likely to be, at least early on, the kind of main avenue in which kind of end users interact with Celo as a payments platform. It doesn't just quite have the broad enough distribution, and we don't quite have enough data out there to really understand which behaviors would be valuable from a consumer and product growth perspective to try to promote, right? So I think PayPal probably discovered that when users make a payment, or I'm not sure exactly what the $10 were specifically tied to, but whatever behavior they tied it to, I would imagine that previously they had seen that behavior correlates with frequent engagement with the product. And I think I think the famous example that if Nitya were here, she would cite is that Facebook saw that once you friended, I think it's 3 people, you were kind of hooked on Facebook. And we don't really know quite yet what that is for Celo as a payments platform, and maybe more specifically for Valora or any other wallet that interacts with Celo as a payments platform. But once we do, you could imagine the criteria for future distributions, again, proposing that we do this approximately bi-weekly going forward. You can imagine the criteria for future distributions are geared towards that. And of course, you would need to kind of highlight that in whatever, you know, in Valora or whatever other interface through which the users are interacting with Celo, right? To kind of make it clear that, like, you know, this reward is tied to this action that you're taking or that you could take.
Okay, fair enough. And then on the side of attacks?
Yes. Sorry, thank you. So yes, your second question on the side of attacks. I think the main attack, so if I wanted to attack this, what would I do? I guess I would, so we have Sybil resistance kind of in lightweight Sybil resistance in two places in this proposal. The first is that you need to create, you need to complete attestations. And here it says at least 3, but I would, in reality, I think the criteria should be a little bit stricter, which is that, you know, at least 3, but you've also completed, you know, at least say 50% of the attestations that you've requested, right? Because if you've completed 3 out of 1,000, that's not a very strong signal that you actually control a phone number. And the second place that you have some lightweight Sybil resistance is just that it's tied to, or rather it's rewards as a percentage of CUSD balance, right? So if I wanted to attack this, I would go out, buy a ton of Celo, turn it into, or Celo dollars, but that market is not super liquid. I would try to get my hands on as many Celo dollars as possible, probably by buying Celo on an exchange and exchanging it with the reserve in exchange for Celo dollars. I would set up a, some sort of like VoIP farm and a script to try to like verify, you know, a bajillion phone numbers and then distribute my Celo dollars across those phone numbers. I think I saw Tim on the call. Maybe other people is more familiar with the attestation service. I believe there is protection in the attestation service against VoIP numbers. So probably I would need to get like a ton of SIM cards and like, you know, just either a bunch of really cheap phones or just kind of plug it into the same phone over and over. And then finally, yeah, so that would be my attack. The thing is that these governance proposals will kind of be, each governance proposal will approve a specific distribution. It's not approving a criteria, but it's approving a specific distribution that was created according to that criteria. And so if we saw that, you know, after this call, the number of Celo dollars held by addresses with at least 3 attestations spiked by, you know, 100x, that would be very easily detectable kind of in advance of making that distribution. And yeah, and if they waited until after distribution, it would show up in the next distribution. Right, so like any sort of attack on this should be easily detected before the governance proposal were to go out, right? Because the governance proposal will be very clearly like the proposal is to distribute, you know, this much Celo, and if the number looks off, like that should be clear to every, you know.
Yeah. So maybe like my one kind of like piece of initial feedback is like, we've seen a lot of these, not like this specific type of distribution, like carried on this way, obviously, but like a lot of flavors of it. And one thing that I will say is that as it reads to me right now, it is like less about the work that you put in. And it's kind of like easy, like once you just get it set up and you just like sit and it's like free money from that point on. Something that I've seen be like very successful, the determining factor for these own distributions is the useful work that you contribute. And so as I like make people work for it. And so just having like $500 be sitting there is like super easy and it's free money and people like don't appreciate it and they like dump it and don't give a shit about what happens. And this has happened like on every protocol that we've seen that do something similar. And so I would say like, this is actually a really good opportunity to, you know, even potentially saying like, hey, what if we, it's not about like spreading it as widely as possible, but it's about like getting the right types of like power users and people that are like really good community members that aren't just going to put like $500 in an account and sit there and like accrue free money, but are like going to be willing to do things, and then you get rewarded like sizably because they are contributing like useful work. And how useful work is defined like can mean a billion different things. And I'm happy like maybe after this call or like offline talk about how other protocols have defined it, such as like the keeps and the new ciphers and stuff like that. But yeah, but I think that this is like a really good opportunity to focus more on that and like making those people like very, very happy and like a bigger part and bigger contributors to the network.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with everything you said. I think the useful work that this this first distribution would capture is like in all likelihood, what this would do is reward people that have downloaded and onboarded through Valora, right? I don't know that there are many other applications that have like yet to implement or other wallets that have implemented the kind of attestations protocol. Yeah, and I think I think it's unlikely, given the time span and the balances and the like ability to do fraud detection, that somebody kind of would invest the work in like trying to set up like a cell phone farm to try to Sybil this, which you could argue is like.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about it from the perspective of like the cell phone farm. I'm talking about it from the perspective of like, okay, how many people will like essentially like care about $30 a year, right? Like $2.50 a month. Like that doesn't, like that's not enough of an incentive to build like a huge amount of like, oh yeah, this is like amazing, and like I'm like really sorry about that. Sorry. But that's like not a huge community building thing where like it makes a difference in somebody's life enough to be like, yes, I am like a Celo advocate or a Celo community member or a Celo like brand ambassador or a Celo contributor or whatever it is. So I think my point is that like, instead of thinking about how to essentially spread it and make it like as widely acceptable and just kind of like sprinkle a little bit of money, like I'm saying, like people, like it won't make a difference in people's lives that much. And so like their commitment to the Celo network or their involvement or happiness with it or whatever it is not going to be like, you know, I don't think that's what's going to make the difference.
Cool.
Can I participate as well?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I'm just giving like the perspective on our use case. So for those that don't know, we are using Celo for the UBI Celo network. So we are distributing like Celo dollar among like now almost 300 people in several countries: Ghana, refugee camps, Brazilian favelas, Venezuela, places middle of nowhere. And I think like the perspective on this essentially when we think about those use cases. So $30 a year can make a difference, not kind of right away, but the way we see this, it can also, if you imagine on implementing, for example, microcredit, where you can use that Celo as a collateral to get like Celo dollar, can be a very interesting thing, because, for example, in Venezuela and Ghana, we are giving like the maximum they can get is like $1.5 a day. So it will be kind of $30 after getting some UBI. And they actually, they don't have a lot of money in their wallet because they kind of spend it right away in local merchants or trying to cash out. So yeah, just to give a perspective, that will be a very interesting experiment also for us to understand the possibility of microcredit, because some beneficiaries already started to explore and asked about what is Celo. Some actually like bought some of it, and some made money, interesting that for themselves. So some of them are kind of asking about what is it. So we try to explain it's part of the network. So more people use it, it tends to go up. So if you transact more, so it kind of, they are starting to ask for that kind of analogy that I think is very interesting. And at the same time, that's a kind of UBI that you are doing. So, but without having like established value. Another thing that, for example, in Venezuela, they are doing the Celo dollar more as a savings for something that can happen, because it's kind of difficult to cash out, but at least they know it's dollars and they can protect themselves against like inflation. So it depends on the places. They use the Celo dollar in the kind of a different approach. So yeah, so basically just to share this feedback about what we are learning from the field.
Anthony, I had a comment as well, which was that I think the question about attack resistance is an important one. And I think with 700K Celo up for grabs, that would absolutely motivate somebody to use virtual SIMs and farm this. So I would recommend that we look at implementing a smaller initial round to test and learn. To Victor's point around making folks do useful work, I actually think that getting 40,000 people to install Valora and to go through the attestation process is a significant amount of useful work. And it also creates an install base that the Valora developers could then send push notifications to. Someone who installs a payment app and goes through the process of doing the attestations is very likely going to have notifications enabled so they can see when they get a payment. So I think that what the scale of funds that we're talking about contributing here is appropriate for developing that sort of captive audience from a user-based perspective with Valora.
Yeah, I'd love to just clarify that 700,000 number real quick, just because I think it may be unclear. Or maybe two points to respond to that. The first is that the 700,000 number is a proposal to cap the total program. So not the first distribution, but just all of the distributions, which, again, would occur over approximately a year. Again, and each distribution is voted on by governance. So, if we're not seeing the results that we're expecting, or we want to kind of change the criteria or the scale, like it's very flexible. But the 700,000 number is just, we're suggesting not devoting any more than that to this program over a long period of time. Yeah, and I think on the, I would agree that 700,000 Celo is a significant honeypot for an attacker and enough to motivate somebody to attack this. And I think, again, we have kind of these lightweight mechanisms in place to be resistant to that. And I think it would be a decent amount of work to attack it. And then I think most importantly, it should be very easy to detect when that attack is taking place. And of course, if you detect an attack, there's no compulsion to do a distribution, right? So, distributions would always happen after the code that would kind of detect somebody trying to manipulate this. So I think there's some protection there.
Yeah, I want to interject a bit. We have 25 more minutes to the call, and I want to give an opportunity for the next item on the agenda. So it sounds to me, based on the feedback we're getting here for this current proposal, we would need to explore the attack vectors a little bit more, just to understand the consensus process around that. And potentially, maybe there's an avenue for experimentation with smaller items, and like with a smaller amount or something. So I would suggest we try to wrap up this topic either right now within the next few minutes, and to continue discussion on the forum post link, and then to revisit it in the next call once we had more time to talk more about it and talk about it offline and stuff.
Can I quickly ask one question?
Sure.
Regarding this?
Yeah.
Is there a reason for the asset payout to choose Celo and not Celo dollars?
Yeah, real quick. I think the idea here is to kind of align. The thing about Celo that is not true about Celo dollars is that Celo holders, I think, are much more aligned with and able to participate in kind of the growth and upside of the network in a way that Celo dollar holders are not.
And it also provides a kind of an investment opportunity for them.
Understood. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm capturing everyone's thoughts and stuff. I'm doing meeting notes so we can, review everyone's points after. I suggest that we move to the next item on the agenda. All right, so CVP 15 is a proposal for adding Zcash to the Celo treasury reserve, sorry. Deepak, actually, if you scroll back, just like back, if you look at CVP 15 hyperlinked by Alchemy DC, that would give like a much, that link, exactly. That's a better, I think, better display of it. All right, David, do you want to kick it off?
Great, thanks, Yaz. So good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Campbell, known on the forums and on GitHub and Discord as Alchemy DC. I'm responsible for strategy and operations at the Electric Coin Company, which is the company that has been responsible for bringing the Zcash cryptocurrency into the world. Prior to working full-time in cryptocurrency, I was doing cybersecurity at WebScale and was the chief security officer for SendGrid. I was really pleased to be able to make crypto my day job a couple of years ago, and had my attention drawn to Celo by one of the cryptographic founders of Zcash, a gentleman by the name of Eran Tromer, who is one of the cryptographers who has contributed to the design of Celo's Plumo light client protocol. Plumo notably relies upon ZK snarks, which is part of the core cryptography that Zcash depends on. And so when I first looked at the project and first spoke with Renee and Marek, it became immediately clear to me that there was very strong mission alignment between the mission of Celo and the mission of the Zcash project. One of the biggest reasons why I think strong privacy is important, or confidentiality is important for cryptocurrencies, is to have censorship resistance. We're not going to be able to create the conditions of prosperity for everyone if arbitrary censorship is possible. So I've been working on this proposal for some time. I also participated in the Celo stakeoff and continue to operate the Zanshin Dojo mainnet validator group. So I've been really pleased to follow along with the progress of the project and wanted to explore adding Zcash to the Celo reserve, because I think it provides an opportunity to diversify the Celo reserve, further providing stability for Celo USD, and also creates, I think, the first step of a sort of marriage of the two houses between the Zcash project and the Celo project, again, grounded in that mission alignment. The things that really appeal to me about Celo are the mobile first strategy, the go-to-market that involves finding people where they are. I think a big problem with cryptocurrency, particularly here in the US, is that the predominant use case is speculation. And speculation, I think in and of itself, does not help us create the preconditions of economic prosperity for folks. So getting a mobile first payment application in the hands of people who are really the unbanked is meaningful to me. That is something that the Electric Coin Company, my employer, has worked on significantly with our Crypto in Context program, led by Josh Swihart, who's on the call here today as well. And I know that Celo has invested a significant amount of resources in doing hands-on research in places, working with folks who need this technology to make it work for them. So I think there's strong mission alignment. I think there's an opportunity to have deeper technological alignment. But specifically as it relates to the reserve, if I look at the composition of the reserve today, there's a lot of Celo in the reserve, obviously, a significant amount of Bitcoin, but then also Ethereum and DAI. I love Ethereum. I've been involved in the Ethereum project for a long time. And I think DAI is a solid stable coin as well, but there's quite a lot of technological dependence on the Ethereum layer 1 here with those two components of the reserve. Adding Zcash to the reserve, I think would hedge against technological risk associated with a catastrophic failure of technology on the Ethereum chain. Zcash is a proof of work token that was a code fork of Bitcoin, but it really has there's no shared dependency with Ethereum technologically, either from a layer 1 perspective or from a code perspective. So I think that summarizes the reasoning for wanting to do this. As it relates to like what is Zcash and what's been going on there, some notable news that I think is worth sharing is that the Electric Coin Company, which is my employer, started its life as a for-profit venture-backed company and has recently turned the corner, turning into a not-for-profit entity. So this is notable because it shows that the early investors and founders of the Zcash project believe that it's in the best interest of the community to essentially donate their interests in that underlying corporate entity to make it to give it to the community. So I think this is a strong signal. I think it's a meaningful move for decentralization of the project. And I think it bodes well for the future of the Zcash project. Separately, as I mentioned, the Electric Coin Company brought Zcash into the world, but the Zcash community recently decided to allocate 20% of issuance of new block rewards for the next 4 years for ongoing development of the project. But they didn't allocate those funds to my company. Notably, they allocated the largest share of those funds to a community development treasury called the Major Grants Review Committee. So there's significant development happening on the Zcash protocol that is not being done by my company. It's not being done by the Zcash Foundation. It's being done by third parties with oversight from these independent members of the community. And it's a material amount of funding. Separately, I think there's been quite a bit of concern around regulatory scrutiny associated with so-called privacy coins. And I have to tell you that when I think about encryption on blockchain projects, I remember what the crypto wars were like in the 90s when Netscape introduced the first SSL capability into web browsers. And this really is what caused e-commerce as we know it to evolve on the internet. And back then, the US government tried to stifle and block export of strong encryption overseas. And today, the US government requires that US government sites use strong encryption. Every e-commerce site has to pass a PCI DSS certification. It requires that they use strong encryption. I believe with strong conviction that going forward, we will see all cryptocurrency projects will have confidentiality to some degree or another. And this idea that Zcash as a privacy coin will be as sort of absurd as the idea that Netscape or Google Chrome is a privacy browser. Privacy is just something that these projects need to have. And it's not just me that has this point of view. So recently, Gemini, which is the most highly regulated exchange in the United States, based in New York, added support for withdrawing shielded Zcash for their users. So it's literally using ZK snarks to provide robust on-chain privacy. I think regulators understand that if we're going to have a financial revolution here, it's not going to happen on purely transparent blockchains, and that you can have confidentiality in highly regulated environments, and that it's good for user privacy, it's good for national security, and it doesn't enable bad use cases any more than cash enables such bad use cases in today's economic system. So with all that said, I'd like to take questions from the group. My proposal basically suggests that we start with a fairly small or humble allocation of the reserve to be diversified into Zcash. There are trustless so-called bridges that could allow this to be automated, although I would ask that we walk or crawl, walk, run here and manage this manually until such a time that the interoperability team at Celo, led by James Presswich, believes that the automated interoperability is of sufficient quality that it should be used for this purpose. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions from the group or open it up for discussion.
I can take the first. Have you considered like giving the Celo locket instead of, for example, asking for $500 locket? and base the distribution on, for example, the spending rate, how many different addresses they transact that are verified, instead of having like a locked amount. So basically do the opposite. So incentivize them to keep using because Celo is locked.
I think that's a question for you, Anthony.
Sorry, have we considered incentivizing more specific?
So you're saying like one of the thing that you are considering is like to lock up like $500, $500, yes, to get the Celo. I was saying that it would be like you get the Celo locked instead of you have to lock like an amount, and the amount of Celo that you get is based on transaction spending rate and different value verified addresses that you transact with.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that we would think about proposing in future distributions when we have a better understanding of what like the growth levers are. But I'd like to, just given that we spent, I think, kind of most of the call already on this, I think probably it would be best to move to asynchronous discussion of that specific proposal, and kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of discuss David's proposal with respect to Zcash and reserve allocation.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
thank
on that front, I can kick it off with a few questions. And thanks, DC. I think that was a really great presentation and overview. So I guess I have three quick questions. The first one is around the distribution. I was kind of curious for the reasoning of kind of taking the 5% from Ethereum and not kind of evenly across all of the existing assets, the non-Celo assets. Or I guess maybe you considered some other methods of creating that allocation. I was just kind of curious how you came to the one that you've proposed. Secondly, I was kind of curious if you looked at how correlated ZEC is to the other assets in the reserve. I think one of the big advantages of diversifying the reserve is that we can add assets that are less correlated, and therefore ensure that the reserve is always over collateralized, even in kind of down markets. And I think I know that the common line of thinking is that all crypto assets are correlated, but in our analysis, we've actually shown that that's not always the case. And so would love to see how ZEC correlates to kind of BTC and ETH specifically. Yeah, my third question is, I think I just forgot it, so maybe we'll start with these two, and I can revisit if I remember again.
Sure. So for the distribution, I did that back in July. So I had to refer to my notes to figure out what the reasoning was. But I believe it was to specifically hedge against the technological associations, the tight lineage between Celo and Ethereum. So there's the layer one connection with Ethereum itself. There's Maker being a dependent on the Ethereum layer one, but then Celo blockchain uses Geth under the hood. And therefore, if there's a catastrophic world-ending bug in Geth upstream that we on Celo are downstream of and are impacted by, I think it could have significant effect on us here in the Celo world. But I don't have strong conviction around these distributions. I would look to Marcus and others on the C Labs team that are more directly responsible for managing the reserve to recommend an allocation that makes the most sense, given that they live and breathe this every day. In terms of correlation, I think ZEC has always been fairly correlated with Bitcoin. Over the past 12 months, year to date, we've seen very tight correlation with Ethereum. That's broken away a little bit in the run up to the election. Haven't been looking at charts a whole lot for the past. I've been looking at charts this week, but they're not cryptocurrency charts. I would say that
Gee, I wonder which ones.
Yeah. Primarily, though, we're fairly tightly correlated with both Bitcoin and Ethereum. But we'd be happy to provide as addendums to this presentation some longer term charts that show both correlation with those other coins in the reserve as well as volatility, because I know that's a concern as well.
Yeah, I think maybe one kind of small suggestion would be to show before and after, Zach, what the impact would be on the stability of the reserve. And Marcus has really good infrastructure for doing that analysis, and so I think it would be actually pretty easy to do. And then the third question I remembered now was around the community fund. You mentioned that there's now a fair amount of ZEC allocated from block rewards to this. Was it a fund or a committee? I forget the exact words you used. I was kind of curious if there would be appetite from that group to maybe contribute an initial small kind of starting amount of ZEC as part of this proposal. I think it's just makes it really nice to to kind of co-fund this together, so to speak.
Sure. So the fund is called at this time the Major Grants Fund. I believe that group is in the process of renaming it to be inclusive of activities that transcend grants, to include bounties and prizes and other things that we know work in this space. I am not a member of that committee. The community held an election. I did run for a seat on that and did not win. So it's interesting to see the community sort of growing its own strong will, independent from Electric Coin Company and also from the Zcash Foundation. So I see that as a strong move. In terms of their appetite to fund such a thing, I can't speak for them. I do know that Hudson Jameson is a member of the Ethereum Foundation community. He did win one of those seats, and I think that he does think highly of Celo. I think rather than just say we're going to contribute some ZEC to seed the reserve, I think if I were on the Major Grants Committee, I would be more interested in funding interoperability between the Celo network and the Zcash network. But that's my opinion as a member of the Zcash community, not as a member of that Major Grants Committee. But I'll certainly make the suggestion that they take a look at investments in that area. Someone would need to propose it, and ideally that would be somebody that's got a foot in both camps. But due to my employment at ECC, it probably shouldn't be me.
Got it. No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Hey, DC, Volpe here. Thanks a lot for your proposal. I remember I left some comments back in July or August, so I might also be a little bit rusty. Thanks a lot for the proposal, by the way. I wanted to ask you, are you thinking about a use case in which Celo or Celo dollar holder uses the bridge, makes an anonymous transaction in the Zcash exchange, and then bridges back? And it will be like using the bridge as a privacy solution for Celo? Or are you thinking this is a purely economical perspective for hedging the reserve and all the risk you have mentioned? Sure.
So I do think that for Celo to achieve its mission, it's going to need to have transaction privacy at some point down the track. I don't know if such an architecture where Celo users need to cross a bridge into the Zcash ecosystem to privately transact is the optimal solution. It's certainly possible. I do believe that generally speaking, cryptocurrency users have worse privacy when they need to take action to specifically provide confidentiality for a singular transaction. Their confidentiality is usually much stronger if they're holding funds in a system that is intrinsically confidential. But that's not to say that I'm not interested in evaluating such an architecture. But I do think here that what we need to do is crawl, walk, run. And I do think, given the strong mission alignment, given the technological DNA that we share with the snarks, that even a symbolic allocation in the Celo reserve that starts people thinking about, oh, Zcash and Celo are kind of birds of a feather, would be a step in the right direction, with the eventual goal being that Zcash could be used by Celo users to great effect and vice versa, and that as value accrues to Celo holders, it also accrues to Zcash holders based on the way that we work together more broadly in the ecosystem. I think that's the overall goal.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, hey, this is Victor. I wanted to second Mike's point earlier about just seeing some of the kind of like correlations and what happens to the volatility and all the other metrics when you add or remove Zcash based on like these different scenarios. One other thing that I wanted to say is like your points around kind of like dependence on the ETH based ecosystem, whether it's like Geth and stuff. I mean, like ETH and Maker have been operating for like many years at this point. And they've been like really, really stable, both of them, even in like periods of extreme volatility. So based off of your argument, it sounds like what you should be proposing off that logic is that you would decrease the Celo reserve from like 50 to 45%, right? Because Celo out of the two is like the less proven one. So I think maybe like, I don't have like particularly strong opinions over like which asset is more or less, but I would say like I would maybe like come back to that reasoning and be like, is that like rationale the correct one to like decrease ETH? And if not, like what is the correct rationale? And if this is the rationale we want to stick to, like is ETH the right thing to decrease? Is it better to decrease like Celo because it is the less proven of the two systems? So just something to think about.
That's interesting, Victor. I think, again, I defer to Marcus and the other folks at C Labs that have advanced degrees in economics and study this stuff day and night as to what allocation makes the most sense. I would say that looking at Ethereum and Maker, you mentioned they've got a proven track record. I do want to call attention to the fact that Zcash just turned 4, which is not a long time by Web 2 standards, but it's an awfully long time by cryptocurrency standards. So I feel that the track record and the stability of the Zcash protocol is commendable and notable at this point. As to whether we should pull from the Celo component of the reserve, the Ethereum component, or the DAI component, in a previous conversation with Renee, he basically shared with me that he sees DAI as a sort of placeholder for N number of other stablecoins. So I didn't want to touch that piece of it, but I really see that that piece of the proposal as being an important detail, but a detail that is really not in my wheelhouse to have a strong opinion about. I think there are folks that, other folks on this call and elsewhere in the ecosystem that really have better information upon which to help guide that decision.
Cool. Yeah, just in the interest of time, I have to interject. We have a minute until the call ends. So I think like I want to summarize what's happening in this call so far. It seems like there should be an action item for next time would be showing the correlation of Zcash with other assets, as well as exploring potentially either from like a legal and from like an experimentation point of view, like what would make sense either to start off with a percentage of the reserve, as well as potentially deferring to Marcus for any of the other open questions that we have. And I would suggest that we do that asynchronously. I can, as an action item for me, I can merge your draft proposal into the repository, and I would encourage you to make a forum post on our forum, or I can make it on your behalf, and we can use that as a stepping stone to summarize everything and what are the next steps and stuff. How does that sound for everyone?
Sounds great. Yes, thank you for coordinating, and thanks to everybody for listening.
All right, cool. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us on the governor's call. I'm gonna upload the video and the meeting notes soonish, and I'll start working on the forum post, and then we can take the discussions offline. And I'm gonna update the Celo mailing list with all the points that we talked about today, so everyone can follow up on where the links are and how to continue the discussion moving forward. Okay, all right. So thank you everyone, and take care.
I think so. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.